The life of David, the king of Israel, is not only exemplary as a biblical leader, but even any political leader, any spiritual leader, any leader of any type who wants to know how to lead, he would be advised to do a study on King David. That's why I wrote a book, Leadership, King David Style, which is a look at the lessons picked from the life of David in 2 Samuel. And there are many lessons. But today I want us to just look at his emotional intelligence. When we say emotional intelligence, we mean his ability to read, understand, and manage his own emotions so that he doesn't act out of a guy who has lost his temper, but also his ability to read the emotions of his friends and enemies and act in a way that does not respond to those emotions in an unwise way. And that is the big lesson that we who lead today need to have. You cannot be a leader and continually act from emotional outbursts. You will certainly end up making decisions which only a few minutes later you regret. Because acting of emotions is not acting out of your mind. Because your emotions can make you do all kinds of things. That's why sometimes we talk about a person, he lost his temper. What does that mean? He was no longer himself. And people can even murder, or even kill, or even fire their best worker, only to regret later. Can you see then why this is a very, very important lesson out of David's life? And my prayer and hope is that we can learn something out of it. The lesson is drawn out of the early part of David's life. He is an employee of King Saul, although by that time he's already ordained or anointed to be king, but he's willing to play cool, act like he has not been anointed king, and just be an obedient civil servant to King Saul. Look at 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 1. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. Remember, Jonathan is the son of the king, therefore the likely heir when King Saul dies. Verse 2. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return home to his family. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. This young boy appears in public and became sensational when he killed Goliath. Women are singing, all kinds of things are happening. But he is able to handle his own emotions. This young boy his singing abilities are noticed. And so he comes in the king's house as one who can play music and cool the emotions, the raw emotions of the king. But his ability not to react as per his own emotions or the emotions of others, like the women singing for him, makes him an attractive person. And because he is attractive, he soon becomes friends with Jonathan. the son of the king. And so he now has an ally within the palace where the king, who is a potential enemy, is. I think that's one of the big benefits of emotional intelligence. They say it takes two to tango. What that means is that if you are able to control your emotions, fight will be rare, if ever. Can you see, by David controlling his emotions rather than showing, "What? Have you heard? Jonathan, have you heard who I am? I killed him." No. He's just cool and be collected, like they say. It attracts Jonathan into friendship. My friend, if you have any leadership role, may you learn not to act out of your emotions or the emotions of those who praise you, or emotions of those who oppose you, just to act on the basis of a cool mind. And then, in the process, you get people around you who admire you but have gone beyond admiration, become your friend. Like Jonathan, in verse 4, we are told he took off the robe he was wearing. That's a kingly robe in the palace, and gave it to David, a son of a poor shepherd, or poor peasant, if we call Jesse that. Now is able to wear a kingly robe along with a kingly tunic and a kingly sword, a kingly bow, and even a kingly belt. And it all comes out of his ability to control his emotions and therefore become friendly and acceptable to Saul. How many problems are you having in your leadership? And if you really check, it comes out of your inability to manage your emotions or read the emotions of others. Verse 5 says of 2 Samuel 18, of 1 Samuel 18, whatever mission Saul sent him on, David was so successful that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the troops and Saul's officers as well. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with David but had departed from Saul. So he sent David away from him and gave him command over 1,000 men, and David led the troops in their campaigns. In everything he did, he had great success because the Lord was with him. When Saul saw how successful he was afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David because he led them in their campaigns. Now, when you are able to control your emotions, you can concentrate on the task at hand. And when you concentrate and focus at the task in hand, chances are your performance will be exemplary. Once your performance is exemplary, you make it even those who are jealous to become powerless to do any harm to you. Can you see the connection? If you act out of emotions, your performance will suffer. And because your performance suffers, people don't admire you, people don't want you to lead them. Good performance making even those who are jealous of you powerless to harm you. And that's why you need to be careful how you react. Concentrate on what needs to be done. Control your emotions even when you are being provoked to act emotionally. You need to have the ability to control your emotions so you never act. If, for example, you are feeling very emotional on a matter, suspend judgment. Don't decide. Walk away from the scene rather than act out of the raw emotions. That way you are able to do what needs to be done and be a good performer. Look at verse 6. When the men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine, the women came out from all the towns of Israel to meet King Saul with singing and dancing, with joyful songs, and with timbrels and lyres. As they danced, they sang, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. Here, the women have decided to compose a song, and the song is praising David, and doesn't say very good words for Saul. Saul has slain his thousands, but this young boy, David, tens of thousands. What happens when people start praising you? That's one thing that causes emotional surges. When people are singing your praise, you even start feeling like you are not normal. You are special. Human beings are not your level, because you can see the praise you are receiving. It is that praise that creates emotions that can bring you into trouble. Ever heard? Pride comes before a fall. So you cannot stop people praising you. You cannot stop people talking nice things about you. You may not even be able to stop your emotions changing, you being elated. No, you can't stop it. It may be difficult, but you can manage it. Don't act out of that. Be aware, even as this one are praising you, there are others who don't believe you are doing a good job. There are others who have a problem with you. It is that ability to not allow your emotion to take over that's going to help you to manage praise. Please know, praise of a junior will infuriate the boss. And if you know, then you control your emotions. So that means when you go before the boss and people are singing your praise, you must play down on it. Oh, I am just, God help me, but let's be clear, I'm not the only one. Other people are doing it. We were many. We are a team. Play down on it. Immediately you start saying, yes, it's a boss. I am special. You count yourself lucky to have me in your team. If you allow your emotions to be the one speaking, my friend, you raise the boss's temper, and the guy will be infuriated, and you make your work difficult, your leadership difficult, your life difficult, just because of the way you acted when people actually praised you. Verse 8 says, Saul was very angry. This refrain displeased him greatly. They have credited David with tens of thousands, he thought. But me, with only thousands. What more can he get? This is the boy David. But the kingdom. And from that time on, Saul kept a close eye on David. Obviously, that's now what we are talking about. That emotional intelligence is not just understanding your own emotions. That's the one. Number two is understanding the emotions of others, and therefore understanding their actions, so that you don't start thinking they mean what they are saying. Please know how to manage your supervisor's emotions. Understand them and manage them. And that will be very, very important. Many people are unable to rise in their career because they don't know how to manage their emotions. These are people who are good in performance. They can do a good job. But unfortunately, they know how to manage their juniors. They know how to manage their colleagues. But they don't know how to manage those who supervise them. If you could get your supervisor's trust, you are going to be able to concentrate on your work. And in the process, you'll have less trouble. I think that's something you need to tell yourself and know. That learning the emotions of your supervisor and acting within them, where you know how you are managing them, will make your work much easier, and you will grow in your leadership. That's what happened to David. Just look at verse 10. The next day, an evil spirit from God came forcibly on Saul. He was prophesying in his house while David was playing the lyre, as he usually did. Saul had a spear in his hand, and he held it, saying to himself, I'll pin David to the wall. But David eluded him twice. David was able to predict that this singing by women will bring them trouble, because it's going to make the both act against him. And so, although he is playing his music quietly, he has his eye on the king. He knows the king could do something that could destroy David. So by the time the king is throwing the spear, David has already noticed it and moved and ran away. Please know your enemies so you can manage their emotions, their anger. Understand people. Don't be naive. You must understand people. Sometimes what people say is not what they feel. If you have high intelligence, you will be able to tell that what they are saying and what they are likely to do are not congruent. And so you have a person who will be wise, like David understood the emotions of the king and was able to escape. Who do you work with? Who are people who are opposed to you? Do you understand their emotions? Do you act in a way that does not infuriate them, yet you understand where they are coming from? So you do not put yourself in their traps, because they'll be trying to trap you to get rid of you. But because you know them, you have understood their emotions, you are careful how you answer and how you live your life. Please know your enemies. Be able to assess and know who means harm. Then manage their anger or their emotion. Look at verse 17. Saul said to David, here is my older daughter Merab. I will give her to you in marriage. Only serve me bravely and fight the battles of the Lord. For Saul said to himself, I will not raise a hand against him. Let the Philistines do that. You know, I had a statement which I have not forgotten called fattening an enemy for slaughter. In other words, when somebody wants to harm you, they first of all become friendly to you. They give you a lot of gifts until you fully trust them. When you are fully in trust, it makes their work very easy now to destroy you. It's called fattening for slaughter. So if you have low emotional intelligence, you'll be taken by their many gifts, by their praise, and forget that this is a person who means harm, and it will make it easier for them. You know, the enemy believes in this fattening for slaughter. Look at this King Saul. His intention is to kill David. But what does he do? The exact opposite. He says, Merab is a good girl. You now become the king's son-in-law. That is fattening for slaughter. Who wouldn't want to become the king's son-in-law? But David was an intelligent person who could read other people's mind and emotions. So he refuses to marry Merab. and so that trap, he is able to go over it. Are you that kind of a person who can very easily be fattened for slaughter? Many people have lost their career because they were bribed. The guy bribing is even taking pictures of how he is bribing you to use to destroy you. If you are too keen on wrongly given items, maybe you don't have a very high intelligence to understand nobody gives something for nothing. There'll be a payday. But let's look at verse 8. But David said to Saul, "Who am I, and what is my family or my clan in Israel, that I should become the king's son-in-law?" So, when the time came for Merab, Saul's daughter, to be given to David, she was given in marriage to Adriel of Meholah. So, David did not suffer from appetite for the leader's goodies. You know, when you look desperate to enjoy the leader's goodies, he will use them to trap you. But David did not go down that route. So it's important. Remember, the enemy believes in fattening for slaughter, so your appetite for the boss's goodies, especially if the boss is the one who is unhappy with you, you need to be very careful. Look at verse 20 of 1 Samuel 18. Now Saul's daughter, Michal, was in love with David, and when they told Saul about it, he was pleased. "I'll give her to him," he thought, "so that he may be a snare to him, and so that the hand of the Philistine may be against him." So Saul said to David, "Now you have a second opportunity to become my son-in-law." When Saul's servants told him that David had said what David had said, Saul replied, "Say to David," this verse 24, "the king wants no other price for the bride than 100 Philistine foreskins to take revenge on his enemies." Saul's plan was to have David fall by the hands of the Philistines. When the attendants told David these things, he was pleased to become the king's son-in-law. So before the allotted time elapsed, David took his men with him and went out and killed 200 Philistines and brought back their foreskins. They counted out the full number to the king so that David might become the king's son-in-law. Then Saul gave him his daughter Michal in marriage. Please, we are still talking about emotions and how to manage them. David falls in love with the king's daughter. He had refused Merab, and time went, but now this is different. It's not the king suggesting. It is him who has fallen in love with Michal. They are now friends with the king's daughter. That's now different. What do we learn? Love can make you take earlier avoided risks. In other words, you could see the dangers of this and this and this until you fall in love. And that's why in many cases, the kings used to use their daughters to bring peace with an enemy. Good love is a very strong emotions. What then that means for you as a leader is that you need to be very careful on that area. If you must marry, pick a girl and get married. But stick with your wife. Don't allow the emotions of love to be aroused by other women, like happened with King Solomon, you will soon be off the right path the moment you fall in love. And in fact, my suggestion is to avoid falling in love. Instead, stand in love. What's the difference between falling in love and standing in love? Somebody who falls in love has lost control. That's what we are calling it, falling in love. But if you're standing in love, it means you have feelings for a person, you evaluate them, you think about them, you also assess the feelings of the person whom you feel you are admiring. So you slowly move towards a relationship without your emotions taking over. Your brain is at work. You are able to pray. You are able to seek the mind of God and follow it, rather than act out of emotions. Leadership will be affected by the issue of falling in love. Verse 28. When Saul realized that the Lord was with David and that his daughter Michal loved David, Saul became still more afraid of him, and he remained his enemy the rest of his days. The Philistines' commanders continued to go out to battle, and as often as they did, David met with more success than the rest of Saul's officers, and his name became well known. You get it? If you are with God, your enemy's designs will always fall. And so we have been talking about emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence requires connection with God. Because God will help you to manage your own emotions. It's God who can also manage your enemy's emotions. And it's God who will give you the wisdom to know how to relate with an emotional person, so that you do not create a fire where you should be trying to create peace. And that will be something that's important for you to think about. When Saul realized that the Lord was with David, what does that tell you? Although he knew of the friendship of his daughter with David, he thought the girl was not serious. That he can still use the girl to harm to harm the David. But he discovered that's not possible. Why? The girl was actually in love with David. God is the one who enters in the heart of Michal and lets her be defensive of her husband, love her husband, enjoy the relationship, so that the king is unable to use her to harm David. That's why you need God. Emotional intelligence, just from a human standpoint, not adequate. You need to connect yourself with God so that He can give you a word of discernment, able to discern other people's actions and see where their emotions are coming from. May the Lord help us to have this connection with Him that allows us to understand that we are now acting out of emotions and the repercussions of these actions, and help us understand the emotions of others. May the Lord truly help us to be leaders who have emotional intelligence.